He was sick of the killing. After 26 brutal days and a billion lives, he was numb to it. A child who had gorged himself at his first sitting and now felt nothing but loathing for every further bite he was forced to take. He was a revenant who knew only pain. The ash of a cremated world had turned his face into that of a ghost. The blood speckling his parched lips brought him no joy. With every dull crump and distant whine, the butcher's nails flogged at overstimulated nerve endings. Simply passing his thumb over his chain axe activation rune was an agony he could hardly bear. A month ago, this would have been unthinkable. But he was no longer sure what that word meant. The unthinkable had been the first casualty of Ishvan III. The World Eaters advanced in an undisciplined line, firing from the hip as they picked their way through the rubble. The thud of their powered tread and the staccato burst of bolter fire caused bits of the commercia roof to come crumbling in. Grit pattered off their bone-white pauldrons. The air was smoke. Helmet lenses glow like hot coals in the murk. 100 meters ahead of them, Space Marines and the weathered heraldries of the 3rd, 14th and 16th Legions laid down sporadic volleys of return fire as they withdrew deeper into the ruined commercia. Zgul Dror watched through the dead lenses as the Loyalists' retreat drew the World Eaters in. His pale armor was well camouflaged under a layer of grit and surrounded by rubble. The pale blue of his knee plates and pauldrons eroded to almost nothing but dust, and ash, and too much blood. If any of his former brothers were to look his way, then they would see nothing but another corpse in wrecked plate, and there were enough of those on Ishvan III for one more to pass unnoticed. But not one of them did, to intent on the enemy in front of them, as Dror had known they would be. With his armor's reactor running on minimal power, his view of the firefight was devoid of its usual tactical overlay. But in this instant, he did not need it. He had been compelled to face his brothers many times in the great gladiatorum pits aboard the Conqueror, and had reluctantly shed 6th and 12th Legion blood over the ruins of Gehenna. He knew all too well what Space Marines could do. He knew where on their armor a bolt round would penetrate and where it would glance off hardened ceramite plates. Looking back over Angron's brutal reign now, it was almost as if Dror and his brothers were being prepared specifically for this war. A narrow spasm from the butcher's nails caused his fingers to tweak again against his bolt pistol's trigger. He clenched his teeth and resisted the need to fire. His right eyelid convulsed furiously. Not yet, he thought to himself. Not yet. A warrior bedecked in scuffled imperial purple, with a plumed helmet and a golden aquila still glorious across his plastron, leaned out from behind a heap of masonry and unloaded his bolter into the advancing legionnaires. His name was Pyramus. Screaming at the top of his lungs in language unfit for his patrician airs, he raked his fire back and forth, massive reactive explosions blasting great chunks out of the remaining stalls and showering the commercia conquerors with rockcrete shards. Any human or Xenos foe would have been driven to ground under such a concentrated burst, but the World Eaters ignored it, emptying their bolters even as they charged through the 3rd Legion's fire. Not yet. Not yet. They passed so near to Dror's place of concealment that his armor rattled. They thundered on. Now! His reactor pack shuddered, and as the mental impulse gloated it back to full power, systems whirled and clicked on. The red lights in his helmet lens flickered to life, the display filling up with heat and radiation warnings and rapidly propagating targeting runes. His armor growled like a reeving tank, rubble sliding off him as he rose from hiding. His bolt pistol tracked the passing World Eaters. He hesitated only a moment, grimacing as the nails rewarded his indecision with pain, and then immediately gave the trigger a short squeeze, punching 2 rounds into an unsuspecting legionnaires' back. Point blank, the bolts created the ceramite backplate with ease, a single bolt detonating inside each of the legionnaires' primary and secondary hearts. Death was messy and immediate. Dror gasped as the nails force-fed his brain with short-lived doses of stimulants and anesthetics. He was pain-free and lucid just long enough to experience the full harrowing detail of murdering one more brother. Rage spluttered up from between Dror's cracked lips, rasping from the dented augmentier grill of his helmet. Why? He demanded of the universe as the dead legionnaires toppled over, his head dramatically swollen with the blood displaced from his ruptured hearts. Targeting icons scattered over Dror's faceplate display like birds startled by his gaze. A few of the charging World Eaters slowed down in confusion, turning to face him, but the majority ran on, either too thoroughly committed to the attack now or simply oblivious to the danger behind them. Their fate was sealed either way, gunned down by 14th and 16th legionaries who suddenly had no interest in retreating. Dror's voice crackled with emotion as he charged their rear, ceramite boots pulverizing rockcrete slabs, bow pistols held out at arm's length and spraying rocket-propelled shells. He thumbed his chain axe activation rune, hallowing in pain even before the whirling axe head sawed another World Eater's forearm from his elbow. The legionnaire roared in agony. Dror's shout rose higher still, his rage greater than his former brother's pain, climbing in pitch to match the shriek of adamantine teeth chewing through transhuman bone. They had made him do this. Why had they made him do this? Another World Eater swung to his face, the front of his helmet and a huge chunk of his face exploding over Dror's pauldrons as the 14th Legion sniper named Glalum closed the Loyalist trap from the opposite flank. That still left the better part of half a squad for Dror to deal with. Too many. Never enough.